We start every year with a big proprietary piece of research just to understand what it is that candidates want. And we've called it What Your Target Talent Wants, What Your Target Candidates Want. This year, we're calling it Reed.co.uk's Rules of Attraction, which is a big, fluffy title. But the crux of the matter is that it's insight to help you hire. Just to set a little bit of scening, if I can, in the first instance, and it's interesting the question that got asked, is it becoming easier, the same, or harder to find staff or to be an in-house recruiter? What we're seeing is, from ONS figures, unemployment is at an all-time low, which is great for the economy and great for us as a nation. That's an odd sentiment to start the day, but you can appreciate where I'm getting at. On the flip side to that, there are more adverts posted to Reed.co.uk in the first 3 months of this year than there were last year, and that's an increase of 10%, and that's in excess of 500,000 vacancies advertised. So there's more people in work, and there are more job adverts being posted to Reed, which tells us there is a shortage of candidates, and it certainly is a candidate-driven market at the moment. I think we'll have all experienced that. And that comes with its benefits, but it comes with its challenges too. So in essence, it's never been harder to find talent. So what are our rules of attraction all about? Well, as I said, it's a big fluffy title that we hadn't appreciated was also a James Van Der Beek movie before we invested considerable sums in using that as our title. So hopefully we don't get a knock on the door from Mr. Van Der Beek. I'm sure we won't. But we have insights for you today, taken from 4,000 UK workers, and we've split that audience in two. So 2,000 of those individuals are Reed.co.uk users that were polled from January to February, and 2,000 are an independent panel of individuals across a range of demographics, as is the Reed.co.uk audience. So we have a representative split of all ages, a number of different sectors that individuals work in, and a number of different job levels too. And we're going to cover these very abstract concepts. So I guess my job in the next 15, 20 minutes is to take these abstract rules and give you some practical insights on them. So where better to start than with a nice warm cup of coffee, which I'm sure some of us have enjoyed already this morning. This point here is around giving people a fresh start, and I think it speaks to the expectations of job seekers and what it is that they're motivated by when it comes to their start and their search for work. And I think for us, what we learned from this year's survey is that people are looking for an organisation to help them, in some instances, if it's your first job, to invent your career. And if it's a new opportunity, a fresh start, people are looking for a partner to help them reinvent their careers. And I think that's really important to keep in mind and remember, because as a kind of a medium for people to post lots of vacancies to, I can appreciate there are lots of frustrations at the start of that process for ourselves as recruiters. But it's really important to keep the end goal for the individual, the audience that we're targeting in mind, in that they're looking for that fresh start. So the first question that we asked our panel is what best describes the motivation for your job search? And it won't come as a surprise that salary is still a huge motivator. It's the kind of the recompense for the time that's given and the services that are rendered, and it's also the way in which we fill our obligations outside of work and fund our responsibilities, right? But what was more interesting for us, and is a much kind of brighter, fluffier story to tell, is that it's second on the list of motivations, and it's the first time that we asked this question, was that 31% of that audience were looking for a fresh start. And I think, again, that speaks to that point about helping people reinvent their careers, or if they're a first-time kind of career seeker, to invent their career. It is worth bearing in mind that this was at the start of the year, so this is peak New Year, New Me season, and that might have something to do with it too. Thirdly, in terms of the top three reasons, the motivation behind people's search for work, they just want to see what's on the market. And I think this speaks to that point around there are a huge number of vacancies that are being advertised, and it is a candidate-driven market. So I think this just tells us that candidates are becoming aware of their value, and they're just seeing what's out there. And even if they're not looking, they're kind of seeing what their role is today and what kind of, I guess for want of a better term, leverage they might have when it comes to their time to become an active job seeker. Essentially, it's about people becoming better equipped to understand their value and to navigate a candidate-led market. Second rule that we have is all around being in the right place at the right time. And this could be a number of means. This could be the media with which you choose to advertise. It might very well be the time of day in which you advertise if you want to get hyper-targeted. But there's also some interesting insights here around the kind of groups that we might want to target too. So we asked, what did you use over the course of your search? And We always approach our presentations with a hint of cynicism, and I'm fully aware that I'm up here preaching that job boards were the most selected answer. Of course, I would say that. But what I would suggest is that when we split that kind of audience in two, in terms of read.co.uk users, we understood that there'd be almost a kind of a bias there as the organisation that ran that survey. So we would naturally poll quite highly among that audience. But on the independent side of things too, that split grew. And with user testing, what we've come to understand is the role of job boards, and remove the read.co.uk context, is to provide a large sum of content, a large number of content in one easy and convenient place. So we link it back to that first section when we're understanding that people are, part of the motivation for their job search is to understand their value in the market. If we're able to provide that content, that original content that's kind of posted directly from a recruiter, all in one easy, convenient to search place, that's why job boards will be a big part of that search process. 29% suggested search engine, and certainly what we see at read.co.uk is natural search is the main method in which people find us. And that's due in large part to our commitment to advertising, both on TV, out of home, etc. And I guess this point is all around just ensuring that we're being visible and we're easy for our audience to find should they come through search engines. 24% suggested they'll go directly to your company website, which is interesting because it's not necessarily the same as career site. And one of the big challenges that we hear from a lot of our customers is fighting for that kind of that real estate on a homepage. And if there is a bit of red tape that you're coming up against, I think maybe this statistic can help persuade those who are in a position to help give you that real estate on the first page, because this is where people will choose to, this is where your audience will expect to find you. And what was really interesting for us, and again, I appreciate I work as part of a wider Reed group of companies, but 23% suggested that they use recruitment agencies, which a lot of the customers that we speak to suggest is a big challenge. But certainly the value that recruitment agencies give to candidates shouldn't be underestimated, particularly if you're a senior candidate. From the respondents that we looked at, that kind of percentage grows. And again, it speaks to that point around understanding your value in the market. And if you know a recruitment agency that will understand that market, they'll give you the most relevant career content quickly, and just kind of, they'll be in the know to be able to put you in a position to maximise your value, I guess. So, the next section is all around what time of day do you search, and this was a really interesting one for us, and there's been a number of changes year on year. 22% suggested that they'll search for work, whilst they're actually at work, which does beg the question, if you're all here, what are people back in the office doing? I'm just kidding, that's a bit of scaremongering. 25% will kindly wait until their breaks to perform their job search. But the biggest split of that audience suggested that it's actually when they get home from work is when they're most likely to search. So if you want to get hyper-targeted, this is when candidates tell us that they're searching for work. Now that's really interesting because that's almost in contrast to what we see in terms of the activity on read.co.uk. Our biggest audience share is first thing in the morning, is on that commute. So there is an element of here of people telling you what they want you to hear, but it's worth bearing in mind. I like that I've undermined my slide in just one sentence right there. A really interesting point that we asked a younger audience, so for this slide it's specifically 18 to 21-year-olds, is who among your peers, what kind of audience groups are most likely to be the biggest influence on your career? 45% said parents are a big kind of career motivator, and we work down the line, close friends, teachers, peers and siblings. And this is a really difficult one for me to present, and it's a nice enough slide, but what does this practically mean? Perhaps we might look to open days as a way of getting in front of a younger audience and just kind of bringing parents into that process. And I guess it speaks to, if it's your first time looking for a career, you're going to lean on the people, you're going to lean on the support that's offered both from your parents and also from other kind of agencies play a big factor, career fairs play a big factor, but perhaps a quirky little takeaway for us. 56% suggested that they will apply for jobs on mobile rather than on a laptop and desktop. And throughout the years, as I say, we've been running this research for about 3-4 years now, that split has only grown. And this won't be news to us. We all appreciate that the growth of mobile is here and it's here to stay, and that is projected to only increase as the year goes on. It's interesting that nearly half of millennials that they interact with their smartphones more than they do with humans, which I think plays a really big part in that. And in some instances, people will spend 4 to 5 hours a day on their phones alone. So again, it all just lends credence to the fact that if your recruitment process isn't optimized towards mobile, then you're missing out on a huge, significant chunk of your audience. The next point that we have are around candidates being customers too. And this speaks to the point, and you might have heard it, around recruitment increasingly being seen as a customer service, and how we as recruitment individuals should be considering the process more in lines of with the expectations of a consumer brand. And I guess one of the statistics that we have that paints that picture most vividly is that 73% of our audience suggested that they agree that a negative experience during the hiring process will impact how they view products and services. And how does that work out practically? 38% will share with their family and friends, and of course it's never been easy to do so in terms of on social and the use of mobile. 33% will not use products and services again, which is quite a stark statistic. And 32% just simply won't apply for future vacancies. So what are the expectations? If that's the impact of a negative recruitment experience, how can we better align ourselves with what candidates expect? Well, that's the next kind of chunk of insight that we have for you. 75% expect a confirmation of application, with 39% expecting that to take place within the first 24 hours. Got confused by the 39% there. And again, I think this speaks to aligning the recruitment process much closely with the experience that we would consider as a consumer. And again, factoring in the rise of mobile. In this instance, it's a case of appreciating that people have taken the time to apply, and they want to see that time valued. And I think it's just an easy automated email is one of the expectations that we can fulfill. 78% expect to be informed of an unsuccessful application. Again, this speaks to valuing individuals' time. If they haven't been successful, I think people are okay with that largely. Hello, but it speaks to valuing people's time, allowing them that closure to then put that effort into applying elsewhere, and kind of removing that barrier of giving people bad news and thinking that will leave them with a negative impact on our brand. That isn't always the case. I think people will understand that they might not be the best fit for that particular role. So being able to give people that closure just allows people to reinvest that time and effort elsewhere. If you think, particularly for a younger audience, this is such a sensitive time. If we're able to just provide that closure and give them a positive experience by letting them know that perhaps I haven't been successful this time, but to keep trying, I think that's a really positive influence that we can be on younger individuals. So when no contact has been made, if that's within 5 days, 25% of your audience will just assume they've been unsuccessful, and the majority of your audience will assume that they've been unsuccessful after 2 weeks. And I think that's kind of par for the course. We haven't seen these numbers change or influx too much over the years. So if we were going to paint a picture of the expectations from application right through to when candidates expect to be starting in your organisations, 73% expect to be interviewed within a fortnight, and 91% expect to be in that job within 3 weeks. Now, we don't mean to fearmonger with this slide, but what this slide does is paint a picture of the disconnect between candidate expectations and them kind of gravitating more towards a consumer experience, and what recruitment kind of centres are able to deliver. And this is the most kind of demanding set of results that we've ever seen. That 91% has only grown over the past 3-4 years, which suggests it's only heading in one direction, not the band. So I think the kind of message that we've taken from this is how can we better articulate to our audience what the timeline expectations are as early in the recruitment process as possible, so that people just have a more kind of realistic timeline of what to expect and when they should expect it to happen. Because certainly just kind of left to people's own devices, this is a really challenging area to fulfill. I'd be interested to get your takes after the talk on whether you think 3 weeks is fulfillable. Certainly I'd suggest from a Read.co.uk perspective, speaking to the hiring managers we have within the business, it's a huge disconnect. We're more likely along the lines of sort of 10 to 12 weeks from point of application to starting. The next area we have in terms of insight is all around celebrating inclusivity. So this is inclusivity and diversity, and I know Louise is following us afterwards on a really practical talk on this area, but it was a really interesting one for us because we wanted to understand, and part of the feedback that we've heard from recruitment teams is inclusivity and diversity just a box-ticking exercise for board level members, and we found out that for candidates that's not the case, and in fact this is moreover what a kind of a hiring audience are expecting to see. So 73% of our survey respondents agreed that what a company does to improve diversity and minority recruitment is important. So we can dispel that myth of it just being a box-ticking exercise. So what are the practical steps that your audience will be looking to see from an organisation? Well, they want to see a commitment to workforce diversity, and perhaps that might be a pledge made from senior members within your business. They expect that to be just part of your organisation. They want to see a diverse workforce represented, and this speaks specifically to any promotional materials as well. They want you to openly communicate any hiring programs that you might be running. And finally, any kind of targeting of recruiting diverse candidates, you should be talking about that too. So I guess with these set of insights, what we're trying to do is remove any kind of thoughts or internal barriers of sharing this kind of information and sharing what you're doing practically to make sure that your workforce is representative, a diverse workforce, an inclusive workforce. Remove the barrier to sharing that, open yourself up, let candidates see, because increasingly it is an expectation. Younger respondents in particular, for those 18 to 21-year-olds, all of this activity indexes much higher with them. So those kind of first-time job seekers will expect to see this moreover. A really kind of stark takeaway for us was that 25% of the individuals we surveyed suggest they feel discriminated at some stage in their search for work. We need to work much harder to understand what that's like and give practical advice as to what we might do to bring that number down significantly. For us, that kind of inclusivity piece is one that we want to do a lot more research on and really do our best to dispel this myth that it's just a box-ticking exercise. We're coming towards the end of the presentation. Here's a microphone. This section is all about shouting about success, and when we say success, we mean three key areas. One of which is your company success, which sounds quite dry, but there is a real practical reason as to why we should be doing that. Talking about people success and people development, and finally talking about the success that we might have with our CSR programs and strategies. There you go, there's that slide. Just covered those three, genius. So 1/3 of our survey respondents suggested that they consider organisational financial health and stability as part of that job search exercise. And what's really interesting to us is that it can be, our audience told us, a deciding factor when choosing between two jobs. And why is that? Well, 39% of our audience suggested that they associate a recognised brand with that sense of job security. So if you're working as part of a brand that's had exponential growth as a business, and again, it can sometimes be seen as a kind of patting yourself on the back and something that you want to avoid, celebrate it, shout about it to your audience, because it speaks directly to them joining an organisation where they feel that they've got that sense of security, they want to work for somebody that's successful. And particularly if you feel that you're a brand that perhaps isn't as recognisable as others in your market, it kind of lends itself to prioritising that shout about your business success, because it can be a deciding factor. In terms of people success, candidate application priorities. So this is what are the drivers that move individuals from seeing your job to actually applying for a vacancy. Well, they want to see company culture reflected somewhere in your communications. It's really easy for me to say company culture and then move on very quickly. Thankfully, we've got some experts that can delve into how to cover that in much more detail. But what was really interesting for us is these bottom two here. So second and third on the list, career development and learning opportunities. Individuals want to see their progression, not only as part of their career, but also as part of their life outside of work. And if there are examples, practical examples of individuals from within your organisation that have both developed their careers over the course of time and have also taken advantage of learning opportunities that have helped them grow an area of interest outside of work, then why not use those individuals as authentic voices to how you develop careers and how you provide learning opportunities? That might be a very practical takeaway for us. And finally, we should be shouting about any commitments that we have to CSR. And again, now I've talked about 18 to 21-year-olds quite a lot in this presentation. It indexes significantly amongst the younger audience. In the background, you'll see an example from Deloitte. And Deloitte empower their kind of local authorities to reach out to communities and fund projects and do work in local communities that they feel is worthwhile. And it's not always possible in terms of Deloitte have significant budgets that they're able to provision for this element of kind of CSR and giving back. What we are suggesting is if there is anything charitable that you are doing within your organisations, it's really important, particularly amongst the younger audience, to communicate this. How you choose to communicate that is a big challenge. It might very well be on social, it might be an area dedicated on your company career website, but whatever you're doing within your local communities to give back, we should be shouting about that, because moreover it's becoming an expectation, and it speaks directly to individuals wanting to work for an organisation that go above and beyond and have that sense of giving back. Final section, and what better way to introduce them with a huge disco ball. People love perks, of course we do. I always find this one really interesting because it's kind of the biggest area of conjecture, so I'd be interested to get your thoughts. There are three big reoccurring themes when we ask people what are you looking for from employer perks. Work-life balance won't be new to anyone in this audience, and I think this speaks directly to anything to do with mobile working, flexible working hours, increasingly becoming a trend and moreover an expectation, and certainly they were the big themes that came out. Healthcare and pensions was not something we were expecting to see. Perhaps we were guilty internally of viewing sort of healthcare and pensions as quite a dry area that perhaps has been forgotten about because it involves a little bit more long-term thinking than we associate, particularly again with a younger audience. But that's not the case. Healthcare and pensions indexed really highly amongst that kind of 20 to 25-year-old audience, so it's important to keep that at front of mind. And anything that relates to promoting happiness and well-being, people want to see these activities reflected when they're looking for organisations they want to work for. And now to this slide, which I always kind of have a little bit of it's like being on a roller coaster and be like, and you'll see why shortly. Peak perks, so this is the best of office amenities. We ask people what are the specific, smaller, quirky perks that you would like to see. And I am merely the voice, I'm merely the messenger, so please don't shoot. What you feel and what you feel that these perks represent is a completely different subject, but here are some ideas for you to take away. Free fruit regularly, which is quite boring after I gave it that hype. A day off on your birthday, free tea and coffee, yoga sessions, gym membership, a quiet workspace. A quiet workspace is a really interesting one because it seems pretty low cost and it's not something we would thought of that would be considered as a perk, but a really interesting one. And finally, the two ones that I just kind of have a little bit of duvet days. I don't know how we all feel about duvet days, and again, the kind of message that might or might not send, and sleep pods. I'm not somebody that would want to sleep at work, but that's just me. So we're not suggesting, if you have one takeaway, please don't let it be that Read.co.uk are telling you all to install sleep pods at work. That's certainly not the intention from our research. So in summary, 4,000 individuals, what did they tell us? And what are our kind of 6 very abstract rules for attraction? Well, it's about, first of all, giving people a fresh start and recognising that, yes, salary is a big determining factor in terms of where people will choose and wanting to kind of push themselves up that salary ladder. But moreover, what individuals are looking for is that opportunity for either to invent their career or reinvent their career. Being at the right place at the right time. Consider the media that you're using. Is it in line with what your audience expects and where they expect to see you? And if you want to get hyper-targeted, consider the time of day in which you might choose to weight your advertising. Understanding that candidates are customer too, and there's this really big challenge around recruitment being seen as a customer service. Can we align the experience that we offer more in line with what a consumer brand might offer? Celebrate your inclusivity. It's really important, and it's becoming the expected norm among a job seeker audience. It's not a box ticking exercise, it's what your audience wants to see. Shout about your success. If you have business success that you might think is dry, it's really important, and in fact it's a really key determining factor when it comes to choosing between 2 vacancies. So don't be afraid to share your commercial success and use people as great examples, authentic voices of how you promote career development and learning opportunities too. And finally, people love perks, whether they're the big kind of expected themes that you might have thought to see. Is there something quirky that you think could be a key differentiator? You might want to consider that too. It'd be really interesting to get your thoughts around sleep pods specifically. Thank you all very much for your attention. I know the first presentation day is always kind of the peak for buyer's remorse for those of you that purchase tickets, but I'm really grateful for your attention. We'll be around for the whole day, so come over and say hello.